let's get started. I want to let you all know that you are in for a treat the next hour or so. We had the honor, Casey and I and Chris, Ed, Mary, Ed's wife Rosie, had an opportunity to meet an important person in history last November, and he was gracious enough to sit at our table at the banquet, and we picked his brain until he was ready to go home.
We didn't even let him eat.
Didn't even let him eat. Small pickles. Yeah. So let me introduce this gentleman to you. It's an honor to have him with us today, this evening, to talk to you about his experiences on the 22nd of November 1963. 1950, Dr. Robert McClelland graduated with a Bachelor of Arts, University of Texas at Austin. 1954, attended the University of Texas Medical Branch at Galveston and received a medical degree. From 1954 to 1955, University of Kansas Medical Center. Go Jayhawks! From 1957 to 1963, he was a senior resident at the University of Texas Southwest Medical Center and was on duty at Parkland Hospital, November 22nd, 1963. It is a great honor to introduce to you Dr. Robert McClelland.
I tell people I feel like a broken record saying my story again and again and again, and so I hope I can maybe give you a copy of a report that appeared in the D magazine recently that will be a little bit more organized and articulate than what I'm going to say here tonight, but I'll try to at least give you a thumbnail sketch of my experiences at Parkland Hospital on November the 22nd back in 1963. This was my second year on the faculty at Parkland Hospital. This is a good bunch of our house staff shown here on the steps of the clinic building at the hospital. And as I said, this is my second year on the faculty at Parkland Hospital and Southwestern Medical School in 1963. This picture was made actually after the assassination occurred, and this was in 1964. In any event, I was in the operating room at Parkland on that day, and I was showing a film of how to do an operation to some of the surgery residents, and I heard a little tap on the door, the room where I was showing the picture, and went to the door and looked out, and this doctor right here, Dr. Crenshaw, Chuck Crenshaw, who later wrote a rather sort of notorious book about this, was standing there, and he said, step outside here, I'd like to tell you something. And I said, well, fine. So I shut off my movie projector and stepped outside, and Dr. Crenshaw said, they just called into the emergency room and said they're bringing President Kennedy in, and he's been shot downtown. I thought, oh, surely this couldn't be right. So we went on to the elevator, though, that was just nearby us, to go down to the emergency room. And as we were riding down the elevator, I told Dr. Crenshaw, I called him Chuck, I said, well, Chuck, you know, we're always getting stories about various bad things that have happened here, there, and yonder, maybe out at Love Field or whatnot. Someone got ground up in the moving sidewalk or whatever, and it turns out that someone really stubbed their toe or something. It was really nothing. So having delivered myself with that speech, I stepped out of the elevator door as it opened, and we would walk out into the emergency room at Parkland, which was about a quarter of the size then that it is now. And there was a big area that was surrounded by the various trauma rooms and patient rooms for examining rooms, and this is the area we call the pit, because this is where everybody that came in that had been injured or was sick was first entered the emergency room, was this pit area. So this pit area was covered with people in suits and hats. Back then everybody wore a hat. And nobody, you can sooner go outside without your pants than go outside without your hat in those days. And so, anyway, the room is full of these people, and I thought to myself, what is this? And no sooner had we gotten into this area than the crowd sort of parted, and I looked down through the area where the crowd had opened up, and I saw Mrs. Kennedy sitting on a folding chair by the door, trauma room 1, and I thought, oh my God, this is really true what Dr. Crenshaw has told me. And the thing that terrified me even more is that here we were, it was right at 12 o'clock, and I thought, I'm probably the only faculty surgeon here, because I knew my chief of surgery was in Galveston at a meeting. And most of the other 3 or 4 people who were on the surgical faculty were probably out to lunch, because the food was not the greatest at the hospital, and so people generally went out to lunch. And I thought, I'm maybe the only person here, so I had to almost force myself to walk back there and to trauma room 1 that you see here, and I walked by Mrs. Kennedy, and the Doris Nelson, who was the nurse in charge of the emergency room, was standing there with a couple of Secret Servicemen, I assume, and letting them know who they should let by and who they should not let by to go into trauma room 1. So she waved me on through.
Yep.
Thank you. And I went into the room, and I was really relieved to see that I was not the only person there. In fact, Dr. Perry, Malcolm Perry, and Dr. Charles Baxter were standing at either side of the gurney you see here. The president, of course, is lying on that gurney. And this shows where we were all sort of arranged around the gurney. And I guess you got me there, we're about number 2.
Yes, sir.
And so I walked around the edge of the gurney, and Dr. Jenkins, who was sitting there at number 3, the anesthesiologist at number 3 there, was working the anesthesia machine and breathing for the president. Now, an interesting little detail here about when he was the very first time he was seen in the emergency room was by Dr. Jim Carrico, who was a first-year resident and is just beginning his training in surgery in the emergency room at that time. He later became our chief of surgery at Parkland many, many years later. But at that time, he was a first-year resident, and he had the very first opportunity to see the president as he was rolled in on a cart and intubated him. He put an endotracheal tube using a laryngoscope into his larynx to help him breathe. And so he was then carried into this area here, and Dr. Jenkins attached the anesthesia machine to the endotracheal tube that Dr. Carrico had placed in his windpipe and began to help him breathe. So that's sort of the setup when I walked into the room. And Dr. Jenkins, as I walked by, his hands were busy, but he sort of nodded to what appeared to me to look like the president's left temple area, which was covered with blood. And he said, Bob, there looks like there's a bullet wound there, nodding toward the left temple. And so that's what I thought, where maybe the entrance wound was. And I went and stood where number 2 is there. Dr. Perry handed me what's called an Army-Navy retractor. That's just a little simple blade of steel, and said, here, Mac, that's what everybody called me, would you hold this retractor in the tracheostomy wound? And they had made a little incision in the president's neck to do 2 things. One, and this has always been questioned, why they did this even, because they had an endotracheal tube in. Why would they need to do a tracheostomy? No good answer to that, frankly, but it's kind of one of those things in that situation where you just kind of react rather than think. And I think that was part of why they made that incision. They enlarged it. And one of the interesting things also that Dr. Perry said to me, he said, there was a little wound in the neck here. He said, we cut through that to make the incision. and we don't know, whether this was an entrance wound or an exit wound. And so they said, well, would you hold this retractor in the upper edge of the incision they've made so we can see better what we're doing, he and Dr. Baxter, who were completing the tracheostomy. So that put me in a position about 18 inches away from the wound in the back of the president's head. And all I had to do was stand there and look into this wound for about 12 to 15 minutes while they finished what they were doing. And everybody else in the room was attending to other things. But I had the opportunity to inspect that wound more closely than anybody else in the room because of where I was placed and what I was doing. That is not much of anything but holding that retractor. And the wound that I later drew a picture of for a book by Josiah Thompson, I'm showing where it was here, had blown out basically the back quarter of his head. It was a huge wound. And as I stood there, looking into the wound and holding that retractor, a piece of the cerebellum fell out of the back of the wound onto the cart that the president was lying on. Now, the reason I mentioned that as cerebellum is because there was discussion later about whether this was cerebellum or cerebrum. And the reason that mattered, people thought, is because if it was cerebrum, and later Dr. Jenkins, the anesthesiologist, had changed his mind and said, yes, it was not cerebellum, it was cerebrum. Well, I think he was sort of brainwashed, so to speak, into making that statement. But because I know as clearly as I think I can know anything, and I've seen a lot and have seen and have seen since then a lot of cerebellums during postmortems and whatever, and this was cerebellum, not cerebrum. And the reason that matters is because that means that the wound was large and more toward the back of the head, whereas had it been cerebrum, it would have been more up toward the top of the head, and cerebrum might have been expected rather than cerebellum to fall out. And of course, the official pictures of Oswald's shot hitting the president show the bullet blowing out the top of the president's head. This is a picture that I drew for Josiah Thompson's book, and if anything, it's a little smaller, really, here than the wound I saw. This is sort of under rather than overstating the appearance of the wound. But that's, and it says here approximately 2.5 inches in diameter. It was larger than that. I would say it was more like, what's that, 4 to 5 inches from the greatest extent, to the lesser extent. So it was a big wound, and the cerebellum fell out of the back of it. And so that's kind of what I saw and how that has been related to what happened. Now, one of the things I thought when I saw that huge wound was that the entrance wound was in the left temple. And I later found out that that was probably, and I say probably, not true. But some of the things that I've heard and read about lately, there's some suggestion that there might have been something there. I'm not sure about whether there was something. For a long time, I was pretty sure there was nothing there in the left temple. Now, having read some things in various places, I'm not as sure as I once was. Nevertheless, whether there was a third shooter, maybe in one of the storm sewers, just over to the left of the president, which would have entered in the left temple, the bullet that killed him, I think, came from the front and blew out the back of his head. It came from the grassy knoll and from the picket fence area. And I think that fits in not only with what I saw here, but also what I saw later, several years later, in the Zapruder film. The first time I ever saw the Zapruder film was when Geraldo Rivera was on Johnny Carson's show one night, having just acquired a copy of the Zapruder film. And I got home late one night, and my wife was watching the Carson show, and just before that picture came on that Geraldo Rivera was going to show, and she said, "Oh, come in here, because they're going to show the pictures of the assassination. And I ran in and sat down. I said, well, I certainly want to see that. And I sat down, and when they first showed the Zapruder film, it was at standard movie speed, and showed the bullet hitting the president and throwing him backwards to the left. And so at first I thought, well, the reason he was thrown backward and to the left, because I had heard the reports and tended to believe them on the Warren Commission that the only shooter was Oswald, and that he had fired the bullet from behind. And so I thought, well, why he's being thrown backward and to the left is that the car was probably speeding up. In other words, as it gained momentum, it threw the president's head and body backward and to the left. And then, right after that, immediately afterwards, they said, let's show that again in slow motion. And they showed the pictures of the Zapruder film of the president being shot in very slow motion, frame by frame by frame. And in this view of things then, you saw the president being shot and thrown backwards, and it was several frames later before the car began to speed up. So the thing that threw him backward was not the acceleration of the car, as I first thought. It was the bullet hitting him from the front. I think it came in sort of tangentially. We never saw anything in any of the pictures that I saw anyway. And of course I didn't see the post-mortem. But I think putting various things together, the bullet came in, blew out this segment that we're showing here, and it temporarily blew a flap of what we call parietal bone down over the right ear. You can sort of see that flash as he's hit. One of the best pictures that I've seen since I first saw those Zapruder films many years ago was a film that I ran across on Google just about a year ago. It was a film that Bruce Willis, for some reason or other, the movie actor Bruce Willis, had found that he thought was probably the best reproduction of the Zapruder film, showing more clearly what I just described. And you can look that up on Google under Bruce Willis and the assassination pictures. I think if you look that up, you can see that picture being reproduced. And I looked at that several times over. That was, like I said, just about less than a year ago, I think, that I found that. And that just confirmed further to me that the direction of the bullet was from the grassy knoll and from the picket fence, just like Mr. Hoffman saw. And I think he has he talked to them about?
Not yet.
Haven't been talked to that, so you'll hear more about that in a minute. But putting everything together, like what I've seen, the Zapruder film, and then what I know that Mr. Hoffman saw, I don't think there's any doubt, in my mind at least, that the bullet did not come. I think Oswald was a patsy, and I think he shot the president, but his bullet entered the president's back, not his head. And the bullet that killed him came from the assassin at the picket fence that blew out the back of his head. Whether there was the third shooter that caused a temple wound, that's very vague. Don't tell them that, because I don't really know about that at all. In essence, I think that's sort of my view at this point of where the shot came from and what happened. Also, the fact that later a piece of bone from the back of the president's head was found behind the car and was brought into Parkland Hospital the next day. Someone picked it up on the street and brought this pretty large segment of occipital bone, that is bone from the back of the head, into Parkland Hospital the next day, further indicating that the force of the bullet had blown bone backwards into the street, which would not have occurred had someone been firing from the 6th floor from above and behind like that. That would have thrown things forward, not backwards. So that's kind of my story. Maybe some of you have some questions about that now.
McClelland, would you tell our students about your
your preparation to go into the ER room or the trauma room to help save the president's life? As far as, were you able to put on a gown, or were you able to dress accordingly? Or
no, everything. In fact, everybody, Dr. Perry, Dr. Baxter, had not had a chance to change into scrub clothes. I just went in there and in my suit that I had on, and like this, and started holding the tractor. So I was soaked in blood. And actually my wife took my suit to the cleaners the next day, and the cleaner objected. When he found out what it was, he said, "You wanted this clean?" And she said, "Yes, he doesn't have but 2 suits, and we have to get it clean." But I kept the shirt that had the president's blood on it, and I've got it here if you want to show
yeah,
that now or
I'd like
later.
to see that at the end of the presentation.
At the end of the presentation. And that's the only, sample of that I had.
Did you, on Sunday, did anything else happen?
Yes.
To you?
The next thing that I was involved in, aside from the president, I was about to go out to lunch on Sunday, the assassination having occurred on Friday, and I was going out to lunch with my wife and my mother, who was over here visiting. They were upstairs getting ready, and I said, "Well, I'll turn the television set on and see what's happening." And I did that, and as the picture was forming on the television set, I heard a voice saying, "He's been shot, he's been shot." And I thought, "Oh my, what is this now?" And so the picture formed, and there was Oswald falling to the ground, and everybody, running around excitedly. And I thought, "Oh my." And they said that Oswald, who was being transferred from the city jail to the county jail, had been shot as he was coming out of the city jail. And I went to the stairway, and I called up and I told my wife, I said, "Forget lunch, I've got to go to Parkland." And my wife said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, they shot Oswald." And she said, "Who's Oswald?" And I said, "Oswald is the man they say that shot President Kennedy." "Oh, okay." So I got in my car, drove out toward Parkland, and as I was coming toward the road that I went to Parkland, I saw this car approaching me. It was my chief of surgery, Dr. Shires, and he stopped, and I stopped, and he stopped out the window, and he said, did you know what had just happened?" I said, "Yes, I just saw it on television." And he said, "Well, I just heard it on the radio." So he turned around, and we both sped to Parkland, and we got there just after Oswald was taken into trauma room 2, right across the hall from where the president had been taken. We went in and briefly looked at him while they were resuscitating him and getting blood started on him, and he was about the color of one of these tablecloths. But they got him resuscitated, and got him upstairs, and Dr. Shires and I went upstairs where Dr. Perry was already there. And so we operated on Dr. Oswald, on Oswald. So I was also involved in that. And Dr. Shires was the surgeon, and Dr. Perry and I were assisting him. And Dr. Shires, being an expert surgeon, was fortunate in getting what we call an aortic clamp on both the aorta and the vena cava, where the injuries had occurred. When Oswald had been shot, I've often thought that when he saw Ruby coming toward him, that he recognized Ruby. This was not a stranger to him. And so whereas he had been walking out straight, accompanied by this deputy sheriff, he sort of reflexively turned to the left. And he shouldn't have done that, because when he did, the bullet entered not straight in, but came across his abdomen like this and went through both the aorta, the main artery to the body, and the vena cava, the main vein taking blood back to the heart. An unsalvageable injury, really. And it's amazing that he was even resuscitated enough to get the surgery and then to get a clamp on those vessels. But Dr. Shires was able to do that, and we worked on him trying to expose the area where the injury was for about close to an hour. And then all of a sudden he had a cardiac arrest. He had had enough injury from his state of shock that his heart just wouldn't beat anymore. So we opened his chest though, did a little very brief closed chest massage, which they had just started doing at that time. We didn't have much confidence in that as a means of resuscitation. So then Dr. Perry opened his chest, and we took turns for about 40, 45 minutes massaging his heart, which got flabbier and flabbier until finally it became apparent that his heart was not going to recover. And so he was declared dead. It was interesting, we went outside right after that, and the deputy sheriff who had been escorting Oswald out of the jail there, he said, you know, when he got shot and fell to the ground, I got down on my hands and knees over him, right in his face, and I said, son, it hurt real bad. Would you like to say anything to me? And he said, Oswald opened his eyes real wide, looked up at him for a few moments, like he was thinking, and said, then shook his head real wide from side to side like that, and closed his eyes, and that was the last time he ever opened them. But he said, I really feel like, this deputy sheriff, that he was really thinking about saying something to me about what the real story was behind this, which we don't know to this day for sure. So that was my connection with not only President Kennedy, but also with his putative assassin, although not really. I think they were behind the fence, not Oswald. Oswald shot him, but not the baby shot him, is what my view of the time was. And then one final thing, interesting coincidence, should I tell them about that? One of my other connections with this, and there were several strange ones. One of the first ones, I'll back up a little bit, tell them about my first meeting Kennedy.
Yes, sir.
Before I finished my residency, 2 years before the assassination, there was an interesting patient over at Baylor, Mr. Sam Rayburn, who had been the Speaker of the House, I think, since about the time shortly after the Revolution. He had been there. He was the most potent figure in Washington at that time, Mr. Sam was. He kind of ran the government. And he was in Baylor Hospital across town with being treated for pancreatic cancer and then also a stroke. And as it turned out, my wife, who was a nurse, was working part-time to make us a little extra money at Baylor, and she was working on the floor where Mr. Sam was being treated. And so she called me up when I was at work one day and said she had forgotten to pick up her check, and would I go by Baylor Hospital and pick up her check? And I said, well, sure, I will. We live not far from Baylor, but I never went to Baylor Hospital ordinarily. And so I parked near Baylor and was walking across the street there, and I saw this group of motorcycle cops coming down Gaston Avenue toward Baylor, followed by about 3 big black limousines. And I thought, well, that's what that is. And at that time, Baylor had a side entrance, and the motorcycle cops and the limousines turned into that side entrance just about the time I got there. And as the lead limousine stopped, I was standing right by the rear door. Nowadays, they wouldn't have let you get within a mile of that, but at that time, in those more innocent days, I was just allowed to stand there. And the lead motorcycle cop got off his motorcycle, came back and gently nudged me back away from the door. Opened the door, and out stepped President Kennedy. I could have leaned over and patted him on the back. And I thought, well, my goodness, here I came over here just to pick up my wife's check. And I told my wife after I got home, I said, I went to pick up your check, but guess who I saw there today? She said, I don't know. I said, I saw President Kennedy there. That was 2 years before the assassination. So oddball coincidence, what are the odds of that happening?
Tell them about your surgical consult with.
Well, that was the next thing that came up in the way of odd coincidences. Several years later, I got a phone call from one of my surgical associates who worked at Presbyterian Hospital across town, and he said, Bob, are you coming over to Presbyterian this afternoon? And I said, yeah, I've got some patients there that I need to make rounds on. And he said, well, I operated on a patient today who had gastric cancer and resected the cancer and part of his stomach. And he's not doing so well. I think he may need to be re-explored. He might have leaked one of his suture lines. And I was wondering if you've got the time, could you scrub with me on that case? And I said, yeah, I'll be glad to. So I got over there about 5 or a little after that afternoon. And I walked in the operating room and I asked the operating room nurse in charge of the operating room that evening, I said, what room are we operating in? And she said, I think you're in room 5. And so I went to the little board where the scheduling was and looked to see where room 5, who was in room 5. Well, I saw my surgeon friend's name, and then the patient's name was out there, and it was a Mr. A. Zapruder. It was the guy that shot the film on the assassination. And anyway, to make a long story short, I operated on Mr. Zapruder also. A good number of years after.
What are the odds?
The odds on that, I don't know. I'll say that things are strangely connected, I don't know. That's metaphysics, not
medicine, right?
Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of...
That's an amazing story. When you saw him, was his face damaged in any way?
No, it was swollen, you know, not damaged.
That quick was swollen, right? Was there any, no damage at all on the face? Any blood anywhere on the face?
Well, there was blood a little bit up here, but not that much. Most of the blood was back all over the back.
And when you got there, the tracheostomy had already been done, is that right?
They were in the process of doing it.
So you never saw the original entry?
Didn't see the original entry. And there's been some discussion about the size of the wound, indicating that someone thought maybe they had enlarged this in Washington. I don't think that, I don't know, but I don't think that happened. I think that we make large, when we do tracheostomies or back then,
Make it easier to get the cover.
make it easier to do. We made big incisions.
Doctor, there's a question back here, and I think it's for not only you, but also for Mr. Hoffman. The question was, have any of you been threatened about maybe your life, about what you know?
I have myself. I recently heard, but that's just hearsay, that Dr. Perry may have been threatened by someone, but that's hearsay. I don't know.
Wow.
Remember what Dr. McClelland said? His first information was, if I screw this up, let me know. But one of the doctors said that there may have been an entrance here.
On the left side.
On the left side. But you believe now that... I'm told recently, where I read something, considering whether there was somebody in the storm sewer on the left side. Right.
Maybe there was a third shooter. But that's very, very iffy.
So, in your expert medical opinion, because of the exploding, the exploded part on the right posterior part of the head, and bullets travel relatively straight unless they're hit a bone. Where do you think, in your opinion, would have the entrance wound would have been to have it here?
I think it was up here.
Look where he's pointing.
Probably somewhere in the hairline.
Look what Bill Newman is pointing to on live television, Dallas, Texas.
And then it blew this flap that you're talking about down over his ear that she pushed back into place, Mrs. Kennedy. And then it also blew out this huge hole in the back of his head, throwing bone back onto the street and throwing him backward and to the left, violently. And some people have said that was due to the jet effect of the brain, which is absurd, you know. If you hit somebody from the front with a high-powered rifle, you're going in the direction of that bullet.
That's why.
That's what it is.
Press secretary at 1 o'clock or 1:15 after President Kennedy had been declared dead tells live television from Parkland Hospital. Is this the, was this the news conference in the,
I think so.
in the,
I'd have to
what
remember.
room was that in?
That was in
Training room?
the first floor of the Hoffman Hospital, down on the end toward the town, downtown, toward the east side of the hospital.
Look where he's pointing. He's responding to a question. One reporter asked him, how did the injury occur? And he said, it's a simple matter of a bullet right through the brain. The back of the head was blown out.
Yeah,
Entry,
that's what
exit.
Mr. Hoffman saw. Yeah.
Now, how did Ed Hoffman see the back of the head blown out 5 minutes before Dr. McClelland and his team saw that? Do you think that these two guys made this up? The chance that they would ever meet 45 years later and say, hey, I said the same thing. Aren't we lucky we covered each other? Ed Hoffman was the first civilian to see the back of the head blown out, seconds after it occurred. Dr. McClelland and his team saw it 5 minutes later, said the same thing. Now, if you're members of a jury and a witness comes in and tells you that, Mr. Newman would be called in. He said the same thing. The bullet hit him in the head and blew off the side of his ear. Dr. McClelland and every medical trained person at Parkland Hospital comes in and says the back of his head was blown out. Would you give that credibility? Absolutely. These people dealt with that every day. I don't know how anybody can dispute that the bullet blew out the back of his head. Now that's impossible if the shot hit him from the back. You would expect, where would you expect the damage to be if it hit him in the back of the head from an elevator to the floor?
If it hit, like, say it had come from Oswald from the 6th floor and hit him more farther forward, it might have probably blown rain and bone in the air and forward, but it wouldn't have gone backward.
Wouldn't have gone backward. Pretty clear to me, and I'm just a layperson. I'm not a medically trained person.
And one of the things they try to show in the Warren Commission drawing is that when Oswald's bullet supposedly hit him, that he was leaning forward, and the bullet, came in and blew out the top of his head. So that's pure fancy.
Anybody else have a question for Dr. McClelland? Good. Ladies first.
Doctor, it would be virtually impossible to have a wound like that and ever survive that, would it not?
Yeah.
I mean, all practical purposes, you were gone.
That's right. And it's one of those things, like you say, why did you do anything?
Right.
Much less than think that. Well,
You did because it was the president. Yeah.
you react. You don't think, you react.
Sure.
Yes.
What was the overall attitude in the emergency room?
Well, extreme excitement, I guess, and disbelief. Like all of us when we got through, when he was declared dead, we went back up to the operating room and sat down and just sort of looked at one another and say, what was that? Did we really do that? I mean, it's like a nightmare. Like it's totally unbelievable. I don't know how I'm not articulate enough to describe it. Unbelievable.
Would you have expected anybody to try anything in Dallas that day?
Well, it's interesting. It's not really that, unfortunately, that surprising. They refer to Dallas as the city of hate. And in fact, in the newspaper, either the day before or 2 days before, I can't remember, there was a full-page ad that someone had taken out accusing President Kennedy of treason and then berating him at great length in this newspaper ad. And just a month before that, Adlai Stevenson had been here running for president, and a group of ladies were carrying signs against him, and someone had hit him in the head with a sign. Didn't hurt him, but anyway, it was very embarrassing to people who lived here in Dallas that this attitude was pretty rampant. This attitude of I guess you'd call it the extreme right, really extreme right, which was against President Kennedy and last Stevenson, who was going to be probably running against, or going to be running for president. So,
Going back to the very beginning when you first got there, was the Secret Service still there in the room, in the trauma room?
not in the trauma room. They were outside.
They were right outside?
But the room was so full of doctors, there really wouldn't have been much room for them to get in there. The one thing, Mrs. Kennedy kept coming into the trauma room. And Dr. Clark, who was the neurosurgeon, who was kind of just wandering around in the room, taking part in the treatment, he was there. He was stuck with the task of ushering her back outside each time she came in because he was trying to protect her from seeing what was going on. And so she was the only non-physician person in the room, intermittently.
Did you witness any of the Secret Service behavior or any conversation or anything like that?
Not really. The only thing contact we had with him, when we went back upstairs to the operating room, a couple of the Secret Service men came around where we were sitting with some progress note sheets from the hospital in Charles and said, here would you write down to each one of us what your immediate impressions of what each one of you did and what your immediate impression was. And we did that, and those are reproduced in the New York Times thing on the Warren Commission. Yeah, that's right. And so they took those up from us. That was the only personal contact that I had.
Dr. McClelland, how many bullets actually hit President Kennedy?
Well, I can't say that exactly. All I can tell you is sort of what my impression was. First of all, I'm extremely unsure about that left side. For a long time, I thought, no, there's no chance of that. Recently, I've kind of slightly reassessed that maybe. There were certainly bullets that killed him, but I'm convinced hitting here and blew out the back of his head. And I think that he had a wound in his back that we didn't see because we didn't examine him anymore after he was declared dead. But the next day, I was sitting in our office with Dr. Perry. He had a combined office. And the pathologist who was doing the post-mortem, they called and talked to Dr. Perry about what he had done. And they told him then, they asked him, did you not see the bullet wound in his back? And Dr. Perry said, no, we didn't see that. But he did have a bullet wound in his back. And it's my thinking that that's where Oswald's bullet hit her. But he did shoot from the 6th floor window. He wasn't even there. He was there. And I think he was set up as a patsy by whoever set this thing up. And he did fire a bullet that hit the president in the back, but didn't kill him. So that's 3 maybe, probably 2. Yes, sir.
Did the doctors' statements, did they get filed or did they go into the National Archives?
Did they what?
Did they get filed or did they go into the National Archives too?
Well, they're a public record. They're in the, with the Warren Commission. That's where the originals are. They're reproduced, the copies of them in this. For instance, the New York Times did a condensed version of the Warren Commission, and so copies of our statements are in that reproduction. Yes, ma'am.
You said Jackie Kennedy was in the trauma room?
She came in and out.
Oh, okay.
And one of my interesting experiences with that is that when he was declared dead, everybody left the room immediately. But Dr. Baxter and I happened to be standing over against the wall of the trauma room.
Can we go back to that? Sure.
Dr. Baxter and I happened to be standing over here against this wall, near that wall. And in people leaving the room, and most of whom are over here, they pushed the gurney back toward this wall and pushed Dr. Baxter and I along with it up against the wall over here. We were standing there, and before we could move the gurney out of the way for us to leave, the door came open and Father Hubert priest came in and began to administer the last rites to the president. And so we just stood there. We sort of froze and stood there, but we were the only two people that, although the man who was out at the other place who said he had seen him administer the last rites and that he wasn't, I'm pretty sure, yeah, he was not in the trauma room. He's talking about where he was in the post-mortem room. In other words, after they had left the trauma room and took him around to where they put him in the casket, that's where they do post-mortems, not the trauma. I think he was confused about that. That's my thing. Anyway, he said they again gave him the last rites because when Mrs. Kennedy came in, what Father Huber had done, I could hear him say when he leaned over, he said to the president, he said, "If thou livest." And then I couldn't hear anything else he said. And when Mrs. Kennedy came in right after that, she asked him if he had had the last rites. And Father Huber said then, he said, "Well, I've given him conditional last rites." Miss Kennedy grimaced like she didn't like that. So I suspect maybe when they took him around to where he was put into the coffin, that another priest maybe did. That's my supposition. I don't know.
Dr. McClelland, and I haven't talked to Dr. McClelland about this, but Father Oscar Huber, now deceased, gave his son, who lives in the Kansas City, Missouri area, gave me a call this summer, and we haven't had the opportunity. Brian and I were going to go over and see her paperwork that she collected on him. She says, and at least according to the information, that when Father Huber came in to give the last rites or the rites of the living, or depending on what was going on at that time, he mentioned that he felt that there was a bullet hole in his left temple, which kind of coincides with what.
I haven't heard that.
And it's interesting to look at that.
I'll try that too, but
Yes.
didn't he later say it was because he was looking?
He was looking.
He was looking and said left to his left, who's left.
When he bent over, when he said, "If thou livest," he was leaning right over.
It could certainly
And
have been.
he would have had his eye right in the left temple area. I haven't heard that. That's very interesting.
And she wanted us to come over, and we're gonna find time to come over. She has all of his papers, which would give us opportunity to see exactly his correspondence, and maybe we might find something new there also.
Anybody else have any questions?
The entrance wound in the neck, was there an exit wound from that?
No, that's one of the more confusing things about the gunshot. I didn't see that. Dr. Perry told me when I came in, he said there was a little wound here. In fact, there was a little piece of something knocked out of his tie, the knot of his tie, he said. His tie had been unknotted, of course, and his collar pulled open then. And he said there was a little tiny wound, no longer than that, right here where they made the tracheostomy. And they didn't know whether it was an entrance wound or an exit wound. But that was all that I heard about it. And I didn't see that, I was just told that by Dr. Perry.
Didn't they say that there was a lot of blood?
Not really. The only thing I can think of, well, what was that then? I'm just, again, speculating.
I've often wondered if it was a bone fragment from the brain.
Well, either that or the bullet that Oswald fired that hit him in the back, maybe the magic bullet, it came out, and whether that's been injured from Connolly or whatnot. And I also helped operate on Connolly later that afternoon. I think a little fragment of that bullet or a little piece of bone or something could have been thrown out and just punctured that. It might have been a tiny little exit wound. I think that's a possibility, but I don't know.
That's the trouble with it. It just wasn't, you didn't get the autopsy we should have got
Yeah,
to get the answers to those questions.
That's an interesting story about how it was that we didn't get to do the autopsy, not we, but that part. When they were taking the president out after they put him in his coffin, they put the coffin onto a stretcher, with wheels, rolling it out the back end of a long hallway that goes out to the loading dock apartment at that time. It's long gone now. As they were rolling this coffin out, Dr. Rose, who was our forensic pathologist here, and one of the widely recognized forensic pathologists in the country at that time, and if you wanted to have a good pathology examination, a good postmortem, he would be one to do it. So Dr. Rose, his office was right there by that corridor. He stepped out into the hall. And proceeding down the hall were the little cortege that was accompanying the president's coffin, headed up by two very large men that we assume were Secret Service men, one of whom was carrying a Thompson submachine gun. And Dr. Rose held his hands up and said, state law says that anybody, who's killed under these circumstances in Texas, they have to have a postmortem here. And so the secret, it was told me, I didn't see this was told me by Dr. Rose and by others around him. And they didn't say anything to Dr. Rose, they just looked at him. The one who was not encumbered by the machine gun hit Dr. Rose, who was a rather small man, and this was a very large Secret Service man, slipped his hands under his armpits, lifted him up like you would a small child, set him over against the wall of the corridor, and shook his finger in his face. Didn't say anything, just said, and turned, and they proceeded out the back with the president's body. That was the end of the attempt to get a postmortem here.
Anyone else?
This is his shirt that he still has. So we want you to take a look at this. And actually, I certainly don't want to be morbid about this, about the idea that, we have a shirt with President Kennedy's blood on it, but it's an artifact, guys. In Lenexa, Kansas right now is trauma room number 1 intact at that time. So, Dr.
In 1953, when I was a junior medical student, I went to Washington, the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology. And one of the most impressive things I saw there was an exhibit that they had a President Lincoln shirt with blood on the left sleeve. And that was in 1953 that I saw that. And that was, like I said, the most impressive thing I saw in that Armed Forces Institute of Pathology. And then there's that.
Eventually, what we would like to do, at least what Brian and I would like to do is and I know we haven't really approached Doctor on this, but we're from the Lenexa, Olathe area, and we would like to be able to see if it's possible, maybe to get his clout, to see if we can get into the National Archives in Lenexa that actually houses trauma room number 1, because it's sealed, supposedly hermetically sealed, but we would like to get down there with the good doctor and maybe get pictures of the trauma room that's set up.
We're working on it.
They
And
set it back up. Because when they had it here, it was disassembled.
it's my understanding that it's all set up again.
It's all set up. It's behind a chain link fence. The clock is stopped at 1:05, according to what my source said. And it's Department of Interior, National Archives, high security clearance. You have to have secret or above to be even in to work in the place, because it's in the caves, the cold storage kind of
I
thing.
had no idea. Because I know here, I tried to see it, and they said, oh, well, it's tiles from the walls are in boxes. And everything is, we have it all, but it's packed. It's not.
My source's sister works there.
All right.
And she said it's all intact. It's all already up like it's brand new.
You would think that they might have done that just to preserve it,
know.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. That's what we're
That's
thinking too.
wonderful.
We're trying.
So we're going to try,
Keep rush.
and so.
This is Dealey Plaza, obviously. We're looking north or south west. Southwest, right? Southwest. Book depository, Elm Street, triple overpass, Main Street, Houston Street, Commerce Street, Terminal Annex, Old Courthouse, Dallas County Criminal Courts Building, the jail, and the book depository. This is the grassy knoll area. This is the parking lot behind the picket fence. It's a railroad switching yard. Mary, if you would have, if your dad remembers where he saw the man in the suit. Show us again where the man in the suit was behind the fence that you saw. That's Penn Jones. Can't have it. Man in the suit. Okay, we're good. There it is.
Right there, guys.
Right there. That picket fence runs parallel to Elm Street. Obviously, you saw that today. Ed saw from his vantage point on the highway, he was able to look straight through and see that person. Same picture. Show us where you were standing when you saw the activity behind the fence.
Oh, he's talking about the sign was low.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where were you over here?
Right about there, somewhere right around there.
Right there.
Okay.
President's car came through Dealey Plaza, underneath the underpass, towards Stemmons Freeway, underneath Stemmons Freeway northbound. Ed saw the car right there, 15 feet up in the air from the elevated position of the roadway, looked down in the car. What did the back of the head look like? Blown out.
He was on the far side.
Right there. Back of the head was blown outward.
Now, you guys were down there today, and I know that some of you saw this. I'm going to show you this picture. Now, this is what Ed was trying to describe. Now, Ed is right here, and he's looking into the back of Dealey Plaza here. He's looking back into the back of the railroad yard here. And what he was trying to say is, see the sign?
Lower.
The sign is right there, it's low. The sign that you see today is up in the air right about in here, okay? It's right up here, which is blocking anybody's view if you were to be looking here today. But guess what? You can't even see that because there's growth all over the place here, okay? There's no growth down here. The only thing you have is a small little shrub tree right here.
Mary, ask your dad if there were any trees along the railroad trestle, along the embankment.
None.
No trees at all. Nothing prevented him from seeing that. Well, what's that? What is that?
We took the rifle apart. On the switch
Okay.
box.
The switch boxes he's describing are right here. There's 1, 2, and 3. I'll show you a better picture of that. Well, what was this? A pipe. A steam pipe. It's a steam pipe. He didn't know that because he couldn't see that there was a steam pipe across that stopped the man running down the fence line. And he had to go underneath of it. Did he? The weapon, he threw it like that, threw it underhanded to the man standing by the switch box.
And the steam pipe was 30 inches off the ground.
Which switch box? 1, 2, or 3? Which one of these switch boxes did the man catch the rifle?
Number 2.
This one? Second switch box is where the man cocked the rifle. Let me show you some better pictures. Real quick. I have a few.
Mr. McClelland,
Yes.
do you know when the big sign was taken off the top of the school book depository with the clock and everything?
You know what? I don't. Not, but I know that that last picture that was there, and that's about a 1966, 67 picture.
That's what Ed looked like in 1963. Handsome gentleman.
Handsome looking guy. What do you think?
Gentleman back there wanted to know how old he was, and I said, was he
29, 27.
27.
Yeah.
No, I was close.
27? You're 27? 27 years old, worked at Texas Instrument. He was drinking a Coke, and he bit down on some ice and broke a tooth. Broke his tooth, right? Just broke it. So he asked for permission to go to the dentist, and his dentist was where, Mary? It was in Grand Prairie? Grand Prairie. He didn't even remember that the president was in town that day. So he gets in his car, drives towards Grand Prairie, drives through Dealey Plaza, seeing people with signs saying JFK, stop and wave and all that. Then he realized that the president was coming to town. He drove through Dealey Plaza trying to find a place to park, and the police were not letting anybody park there. So he drove, they moved him out of Dealey Plaza. He drove back out onto the highway. He came back out onto the highway, parked his car right there. Parked his 1961 red Ford Falcon. Do your research and find out what kind of car these people drive. You need to know these things. Then he walked back and stood along the highway. At first, he went underneath the highway so that he could see the president's car come to him.
That'd be a better view.
He didn't like that view, so he walked back up on top of onto the freeway. He saw it. Did you see a policeman on this bridge? Right there. Saw one uniformed police officer on top of this railroad trestle. You all follow me? Yeah.
Did he use anything to see the guy by the grassy knoll? He just, his eye?
Yeah. Remember, we're distracted by noise. He's not. He and Mrs. Hoffman have no sense of hearing because they're not distracted by little sounds like we were talking about today. When the airplane went over, I looked up and oh, cool, it's an airplane. His visual acuity, is that the word, doctor? Visual acuity is more enhanced because he's not distracted. So he can look at things for a longer period of time without worrying about what's going on behind him. Okay?
Now, are you asking basically, did he have like binoculars or something like that?
Yeah.
No.
No.
Nothing.
In fact, I don't even think he was wearing glasses that day.
I don't think he had glasses yet.
Yeah.
Ed's position here, triple overpass. Did you see policemen?
Yeah. Saw
How many?
policeman.
1, 2, 5. One policeman on the bridge, on the triple overpass. Did you see other people?
Yeah.
Okay. From where Ed Hoffman was on the side of the highway, he could see all of this. Of course, he had a 360-degree field of view, but he was looking directly towards the picket fence area and saw this whole area was open to his view.
Which of those lines is east, the north and south, and vertical?
East is this way.
Okay.
It's the man with the hat. Stood at this part of the fence. This is the corner where we stopped and talked today with Mike Brownlee. Brownlee?
Brownlow.
Brownlee, sorry. So Ed saw a man in a business suit with a hat, right? Was he fat guy, skinny guy? Fat guy, big guy. Was he by himself? One person? One person by himself. This is kind of pulled back a little bit about showing Ed's line of sight, not necessarily his perspective, because we're closer than Ed was. There's the steam pipe going across.
See the steam pipe?
There is the switch box. It's not there now. Did you take them over there?
Yeah.
It's just the platform of number two. Number 1 and 3 are gone. This is the guy that took the weapon apart eventually. He stood on this side of that switch box. Now remember, there are people on the overpass 20 feet from him, 20 feet from this guy. Nobody's paying attention to that guy. They're paying attention to the president's car coming down the street. There's the switch box. There are men on the triple overpass watching the president's car. Ed saw a man on this side, and when he cocked the rifle, he came around this side. Okay, you follow that? Before the shooting took place, the man stood on this side. The steam pipe is here. The picket fence is down here. The man ran down the fence, threw the weapon to the other man, stepped around the corner, caught it, stepped back, took it apart, bent over, put the 2 pieces of the gun in a soft canvas bag.
Now that pipe is not there in this picture, but understand it's 30 inches. Remember the holes that I showed you today where the rivets would hold the pipe? It's 30 inches and it's running right here, and then it would run down this way here. And Ed didn't know it was there, but he did notice that when the guy had the rifle and he's running down, something stopped him. And then when he throws the rifle, he's wondering, why is he throwing the rifle? Because he couldn't go past the pipe.
There was 2 ways to go around, 3 ways to go get past the pipe. Go underneath, go over the top, or go around. He did neither. He stopped, threw the incriminating evidence to another person who took it apart. Now he's walking around without a weapon. He's not a suspect.
And Mr. Edwards and I were trying to figure out exactly how long that would take. 4 to 5 seconds. Okay.
Fire 1 round, run at full speed. How fast did he, you remember how fast did he run down the fence line? Very fast, very fast.
Got it.
He's here, runs down the fence line, there's the pipe, stops, tosses it to the man who steps up and catches it, and they walk apart, walk away from each other. Did you see a policeman at that end of the fence, walking back and forth, uniform police? Did he have a hat? No hat, okay? Maybe that was the guy, walking up and down along the fence line. You know, there's police in the area, we don't know. There's a policeman there. Ah, car. And you saw the car drive through the parking lot. Green Rambler station wagon. We asked him when we were doing research for the book, how do you know it was a Green Rambler station wagon? His best friend had a Green Rambler station wagon. He goes, it's just like my friend Mr. Pierce. Just like that. That green station wagon will eventually park close. Did you see it? I can't remember if you saw it park.
Okay. At the same time that Ed is describing this green station wagon, Lee Bowers, who's in the railroad tower, remember today when we looked at the railroad tower, is also seeing this same green station wagon pull in. Okay?
Drove in. This Green Rambler station wagon will be seen by 5 other people within 5 minutes of the assassination, driving out and around Dealey Plaza.
And will stop in front of the Texas School Book Depository building. Remember where I said there was a Dallas sheriff standing in front of the picket fence, or standing in the drainage gutter area, watching the people on the grassy knoll? And it caught his attention, and he looked up there, and there was a green Rambler station wagon, and somebody had a shrill whistle, and somebody came running down from inside the Texas School Book Depository building. He gets in the Rambler. He goes up to stop it. The time is 12:39, 12:40. He identifies this guy as Lee Harvey Oswald. The green Rambler station wagon is the Rambler station wagon that was identified by Lee Bowers and Ed Hoffman that drove in the parking lot area prior to the actual shots being fired.
And those cars were distinctive, and not only are they distinctive, they were a little different, they had a little different range of colors, like their pink was a different kind of pink.
Yeah. Yes, it
Green,
was.
I mean,
Yeah.
you wouldn't mistake it for a Ford station wagon or a Chevy. I mean, they were distinctive looking. Let's see if we can't distinguish a color here. What color green? Is it that green?
Not quite this bright, but just kind of more subdued.
Okay. 45 years, he still remembers colors. That's important stuff. Let me show you. This is the man who caught the rifle. We call him Yard Man. And this is the man who tossed the rifle. They came together and then went apart. Once, twice, 3 times? 1 time.
Okay, how do we get pictures of these guys?
That's the next question I was going to ask.
Okay,
Always cite your source.
this is the movie. This is in the movie JFK.
What's
He was there while they were making it.
There's too close, isn't that it?
That's all they knew.
That's right about that.
And the reason this is in the movie JFK is because Ed Hoffman was a consultant to Oliver Stone on his part of the assassination.
How about that? Very good. Very
Cool.
good.
Without telling me, so I didn't get to meet Kevin Costner.
Oh! So these 2 guys came together and walked apart.
What happened to the guy that had the bag that walked away?
We'll show you. Yeah, he walked away.
We'll show you. Okay? Okay.
He walked back after the two men were together. Okay. Then saw a puff of smoke. Puff of smoke. Smoke.
Thought it was a cigarette.
Thought it was a cigarette. 9 people on the triple overpass testified or gave affidavits to the sheriff's office that from their vantage point on top of the triple overpass at the picket fence, they saw smoke come out from under those trees, just like Ed did. Now, did those 9 people and Ed Hoffman get together and go, hey, let's tell people we saw smoke? I don't think so. I don't think so.
There's the smoke.
Drifting out
And
towards the
floated out. I mean, you can do a lot of stuff with PowerPoint.
I have a lot of time on my hands.
And it dissipates. Holy cow. It's as if you were really there.
Now, when the smoke came out and the man turned, he realized he's holding a rifle.
And he's not smoking. Got it?
Oh,
But he still didn't know what he had done until
Exactly.
after the president came under.
exactly, because he couldn't hear. He didn't know that a rifle shot had been fired. Now, whether the shot hit or anything doesn't matter. We have 2 people acting together to commit a crime. Now, the man turns and runs down the fence line. Runs right down that fence line, just like that. It's almost like you were there.
Check out the big yellow letter A.
The man on the overpass. Did you see them walk around or move back and forth? They were trying to figure out what was going on. And as you can see, I've got people moving. Some of them are pointing towards the picket fence line. They're pointing that direction. Did you see anyone point? He saw people pointing. He can't be making this up. He was there.
Why didn't those people run over and see who it was?
That's a good point. He said, why did those people run over there and see what was going on? Everybody that we've talked to who was there said it was almost like time stopped. It was boom, boom, boom. Whoa, what did we just see? It took several moments for people for it to calculate in their brain what that noise was. By the time the people on the overpass realized that something had happened, the two people were back apart from each other. The weapon's gone. The guy walks back towards the parking lot. It's over with.
Plus 59 eyewitnesses. 59 said that when the fatal headshot hit President Kennedy, the car stopped.
There's the pipe.
59.
There's the pipe.
There's your pipe.
Ed Hoffman had never been. Mary, he was working at the flower shop, right, or part-time.
Yeah, he helped his dad in the framing part of it.
Okay.
At the flower shop, in the framing there, so he did.
If you remember, we asked your dad if he'd ever been to this parking lot before.
Yeah,
He'd never been there,
never had any reason to.
so he didn't know there was a steam pipe there.
But he knew that something had stopped the man from running, and that's why he tossed the rifle.
Now he's running.
You see him stop right at the pipe?
Now remember, well, tomorrow let's try this. Just, somebody stand at the fence, we'll say go, run down as fast as you can, and we'll tell you to stop. It won't take 5 seconds.
So you have the shot. Boom. He doesn't hear it. Boom. Car stops. For how long? 2 to 3 seconds. People in the area are kind of stunned, going like, what's going on? And then as the car drives underneath, they look over to where they see the smoke. Now they're seeing peripheral vision, but at the same time they see smoke coming out of there, and they decide, we need to run over there. Guess what? The guy who has tossed the rifle and the guy who's broken down the rifle, they're gone. Gone.
He tosses the rifle.
Fast.
He tosses the rifle to this man. He stepped up, grabbed it. This is an actual picture of the pipe. And Mr. Quinlan showed you today where the rivet holes are. That pipe. We could not figure out the purpose of this 8-inch steam pipe running across the top of the triple overpass. We don't know what it went to, but it terminates itself into the ground. The end of the pipe goes into the ground. There's nothing steam powered anywhere around here. I don't know to this day what it goes to.
And steam was right through, it was hot, and it's just exposed for people to...
Mary said the steam was running through. It was hot because one of the officers who jumped the fence up here grabbed a steam pipe to help pull himself up. He said he burns his hand. The reason they didn't run it in through the triple underpass is because it's 8-inch pipe. That means now you're lowering the height of your underpass. So they had to attach it to the top of the... It's attached right here, all the way down, and it goes this way. We can't figure out what the heck it goes to. I don't understand to this day what it's for.
The only thing I can think of, at least without doing further research, is that there are electric tracks up there, but some of them may be run by steam. So the person, maybe in the railroad tower, switches some...
By steam. Well, that's a good point.
That's a good point. But at the same time, could have moved the tracks with what's called steam.
Steam, that's good. Yeah. But wouldn't you think, Doctor, that wouldn't you think the steam would be somehow attached to a track somewhere? Because this is nowhere close to a track.
Because today when I jumped over to try to pull the dang track up, I couldn't, or the switch up, I couldn't get it because it was locked. And it was locked because they know people like me are going to jump over and try to throw the track.
And there was a train coming.
And there was a train coming, and you guys are going, oh my God! Okay.
This is a picture from a document. Why am I on my knees? I know I'm regressing back to the bus when I get ready to go back. 1966, this man was one of 18 people on top of the overpass. He is reenacting what he did after the shots were fired, you can see the steam pipe clearly there.
And this is Sam Holland. Sam Holland saw a flash of light, he saw smoke on the knoll, just like Ed saw, just like Lee Bowers saw, okay? And these guys aren't making it up.
This guy's gonna walk. Now, we've tossed the rifle to suspect B. Disassembles it, puts it in a satchel or a small canvas bag. Now, suspect A, the man in the business suit who fired the shot, is gonna walk back casually. Did he run? Casually walk back to the parking lot. Where'd this guy go? Follow the fence, or follow the tracks, carrying this bag. It's almost like you were there. Now,
A goes back to A, and B leaves B's position and goes down the track line, okay? And as he's walking, nobody sees him because all their attention now is on the fence, and they're going around the corner.
right there. He's walking along the fence line, or walking along the tracks. He's not in a hurry.
From the movie JFK.
He's leaving with the weapon in two pieces. And when we first heard Ed's story 25 years ago, people go, there's no way a gun could come apart. They were made in 1937 that would take apart. You push, twist, and it's unhooked. Very simple to do. They've made those for 60 years. All right, now, here comes policeman. Uniform police, he had a hat. This guy, the policeman, he had a hat. He had a hat on. This is not the same guy, the same officer that Ed saw here.
Without the hat.
Without the hat. This man is the man who fired the rifle. Now, police officer Joe Marshall Smith comes up.
Pulls the gun out.
Just like that. Ed saw that. Ed saw the officer remove his weapon from his holster, get down like this, and point it right at this man. He pointed right at his chest, didn't he?
And he pulled something out.
The man in the suit opened up his coat, pulled something out. What did the policeman do? Put his gun back in his holster, and they walked away from each other.
Now, Joe Marshall Smith's affidavit about what he saw that day, he says there was a man walking behind the picket fence. He pulled a gun on him because everybody was rushing up there, and the guy reaches in his pocket and says, Secret Service.
There's no Secret Service agents there.
Puts it back in, drops his gun. They go on looking for who?
Bad guys, I guess.
The shooter?
This guy didn't have a weapon, so
Must not
maybe
be the
not
guy.
be a bad guy. I do. 38 strapped to their hip, but we never know about this guy. Now, here comes the train.
This is some of the controversy.
Here's Ed, Stemmis Freeway, picket fence area, railroad switch boxes, triple overpass. You're watching the man with the hat, man with the business suit. Okay. Now a train's coming across the tracks. This train was after JFK shot. Okay, just make sure you understand. This is after the two men have now walked away from each other. You can still see these people. Can you still see those people? Yeah. You can still see the man on the triple overpass. Nobody's moving yet. Yes, ma'am.
So, would like the engineer on the train have seen the man that was walking down the track?
Not necessarily. No.
Too much time.
By now he's probably out of the picture. He's walking. He's walking. Yeah.
And he's following the line of the tracks. And as he follows the line of the tracks, it will take him eventually around the backside of the railroad tower, which houses Lee Bowers, and where we think the blue Rambler station wagon is parked. Okay?
Blue.
Green.
I mean green, yeah.
They didn't look down any streets too and start checking the cars or anything like that?
They checked the parking lot. When the officers finally got into the area, they started checking license plates and looking inside the cars, but they never looked in trunks. They don't have the keys to look in a trunk. Well, what's a bad guy look like? Anybody walk around with a gun? That'd probably be a guy we want to talk to. Can everybody see this clearly, this picture? Somebody read for me what the advertisement is.
Old Charter.
Old Charter is a brand of bourbon, okay? Right? Nobody disputes that, except one guy. Okay. The billboard, here's the railroad trestle, or here is the railroad embankment. The sign is just above that, but not anywhere close to Ed's line of sight. It's not blocking his view. He can clearly see this. He can see behind the picket fence. This is in a different place. I mean, as far as his line of sight goes. It's here, he's looking here and here. It's not anywhere close. Old Charter. Everybody see that? Old Charter? Okay. Watch when I point to the word. Watch his face. This guy is a New York lawyer, and all of a sudden, in 9 months, wrote the book Case Closed. And if you need a fantasy book to use as a doorstop, that would be the one to get. In his book, 1993, Mr. Posner wrote a book, Case Closed, in which he supported the final conclusions of the Warren Commission. I have finished that. Posner claims his book is the most accurately researched of any kind of the books on the case. Let's take a look. On page 258.
It's really hit home.
On page 258. Is he still looking? Put your silverware away. It says, moreover, in 1963, a large Cutty Sark billboard also filled much of the space between the freeway and the railroad tracks. It is almost impossible for Ed Hoffman to have seen what he described.
Where'd the Cutty Sark come along?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's not Cutty Sark. That's just one of 12 errors in Posner's book, just on Mr. Hoffman. Well, if that's wrong, and he can see the picture, what else does he get wrong? Well, let's take a look. The photographs show the foliage was as dense in '63 as it is today. There's the foliage. There's Ed. There's the foliage. It's about 8 to 12 feet tall, not anywhere close to his line of sight. My question is, which is more dense? Posner or the foliage? Now, Gerald Posner is an expert on 9/11. Now, Gerald Posner is an expert on the economy. All right.
I think he's an expert on Obama.
Yeah, he's an expert on idiocy. Even without the billboard and railroad cars, the foliage between the freeway and the rail yard, which is not a word, by the way, makes it difficult to see very much. Photographs show the foliage was as dense as it was. There's the foliage, there's stationary railroad cars that didn't even block anything that Ed was looking at. The billboard is not only lower than the embankment, but it's at a different angle, not anywhere blocking his view of anything. Did you see these guys? This is the Secret Service follow-up car. They're following the president's limousine, which has now already made the turn on to Stedman's entrance ramp. But these guys had a ride.
Plus that, guys, I'll tell you what, Mr. Edwards kind of jumps on, run that back in. Run that back in. He jumps on Mr. Jerry, good old Mr. Dance there. And there's a reason for this. It's simple research, okay? Here's the simple research. Posner said he went down there and did the research and said that this board was this high and that Ed could never have seen it. And he said that this board was Cutty Sark. Do you see Cutty Sark on this board? This is seconds after the president was shot. Do you not see old Charter on here?
And we know that Posner had access to this picture because he makes a reference to it in his book. He says, I looked at the Mel McIntyre photograph of the motorcade coming through. He had that picture.
And it was Cutty Sark. And I'm going, are you kidding me?
He had that picture.
Wow.
This is a frame from a video that Ed was asked, where was the damage to the head of the president? He said right there. This is Ed's view on top of the overpass, looking down into the car. Did JFK's car stop?
Slow down.
Did it slow down?
Yes.
It slowed down enough he could look in that car.
Ed, would you ask him to show where the wound was? Okay, Dr. McClelland, where was the one that you saw? How about that?
They're both either they're both right or they're both wrong. I don't know. The policeman on the bridge. You try to get his attention, right? Sees the car, sees the president, tries to get the attention of the officer. Remember we saw the officer up here? Tries to get that officer's attention. He can't speak, he can't scream, so he has to run. Did you run? Remember he was here, he ran towards this overpass to get this officer's attention.
Tried to get his attention.
He's describing as you are running, the man, the follow-up car. Did you see a rifle in the follow-up car? Did we show you that?
You guys see a rifle in the follow-up car there?
Right there. There's the barrel. It's an AR-15.
AR-15 F-16 rifle.
He didn't know what kind of weapon it was. He described it to his dad as a machine gun. Right?
Yeah.
That's what an AR-15
You can see the way he,
Yeah. So this guy, Agent George Hickey, right here, sees Ed running down the highway. He sees Ed running down the highway trying to get this officer's attention. Secret Service follow-up car comes around. It's going this direction, Ed's going this direction. The guy just turned around, leveled the rifle at Ed. What'd you do?
he just went like this.
Don't shoot me. I didn't do it. Now,
He was pointing.
trying to get the policeman's attention. How did Ed Hoffman know that there was a rifle in that car unless he saw it? I'll just pretend like there was a gun and maybe somebody else believes it. There was a gun in there. There's the gun right there. It's a little fuzzy, but there it is. Even before they get to the entrance ramp, it's already been pulled out. It's pointed, ready to go.
Of course, if you believe Secret Service Agent George Hickey, for those of you who don't know the story, George Hickey was asked whether or not, when he pulled the rifle out in Dealey Plaza, what did he do with the rifle? Well, Hickey, according to another author, comes in and says, well, we think maybe it was Hickey who actually shot the president in the back of the head. Okay? And Hickey says, well, maybe I did. I don't know.
Maybe I did.
But I'm beginning to wonder, okay?
You know, if you'd fired around.
So he pulls the M16 rifle out, and as he's getting up, he butts the rifle down, either in the seat or the back of the seat, and what? It accidentally discharged and shot and killed the President of the United States in front?
A good trick. Oops.
Okay? Now, Is this flat land? No. It's going down like this. If Hickey hit the back of his seat, where would the bullet go?
Over his head.
So in order for him to, at least to hit the butt of his rifle, he'd have to hit the butt of the rifle up here somewhere in air, and I'm not sure what he's going to hit, and then hit the president in the back of the head. This way, he would have probably shot the guy in the front seat. And I was trying, and excuse my language on this, but I was really trying to figure out if Hickey actually shot the President of the United States, what would his reaction be? Play along with me. As he pulls the rifle up and he goes, "Oh shit!" Did anybody see that? God, I hope not.
Run!
We're okay.
Run!
Excuse my language, but sorry about it.
When we put Mr. Hoffman's book together, we wanted to make sure, because one of the things that Ed said that we don't have photographic proof of is that freight train. We don't have a picture of a train going across the tracks from Ed's position. It would have gone from his left or from his right to left. We don't have a picture of it. It happened moments after. We don't have a picture of it. Ed says that after the lead engine of a freight train passed over the triple underpass, after he saw the encounter between the man in the uniform, the police officer, and the man in the business suit. This officer was on the overpass. He says just prior to the shots. Ed says after, just prior to the shots, a 3-engine locomotive went by. This officer was on the other side of the triple overpass. He said a freight train passed moving in a southerly direction, in the opposite direction where Ed said. Ed said his train went north. This officer and this officer said it went south. They all can't be right. So, in order for us to find out if there was a train, we found a picture of the train. There's the train right there. The 3 last boxcars. This is northbound, going out over that trestle. And that's the train you saw. That's probably the train he saw. Now, where's the southbound train? I don't know.
Now, I'm going to show you something here so you guys understand what's going on here. We believe that this train, and maybe 2 trains, are moving over the main line. This is the main line, okay? What has just happened here? The President of the United States was just shot. You have motorcycle police officers pulling over to the curb already, okay? You have people starting to run. The President's vehicle is underneath the triple underpass getting ready to leave, and you have one of the reporter's cars, the actual photographer's cars right here. And some of the photographers got out and started taking pictures, and you have one of the photographers right here. This is moments after the assassination.
What do we think, 15 seconds?
And we were thinking, I don't know if we put it down, about 15 seconds, all right? Here are 2 trains going over the railroad trestle, and we believe, yeah, that's where it's located, okay? We believe that maybe Ed is saying this is where the railroad cars or the train went. So we see no other indication anywhere or evidence of a train going either way back and forth during, before, after, but we do see the evidence of 2 trains, or at least the back ends of 2 trains. And here, if they're on the main line, most of the time, if you're on the main line, trains are moving, okay? And since there's no engine on this end, our basic assumption is that they're moving away and that the engine is on the other end. There is a however to this. I just told you today, and also Mr. Edwards said, this whole area is a switching yard. Is it possible for trains to move on the main line, back in, and switch things off? Yes, it is. But how far do you have to go up here before you switch the tracks? Most of them are done over here. This is already on the main line, and I would say, by the looks of this, the engine is in front and this is moving out. It's a logical thing, but we can't prove it.
I have to give credit where credit's due. Casey and I were looking, we were almost done with the book, and we desperately wanted to find a picture or a motion picture film of that train to corroborate Ed's story. Casey found it, and we enhanced this picture a little bit, photoshopped it to bring out the color and resolution and the contrast so you can see that. Those trains have to be moving. They have to be moving from here to here, just like Ed said. Remember, Ed's train is moving from right to left. That's where these trains are going. That proves that his story is true. All these people said that they saw smoke drifting out to the street, just like Ed said.
Run that back. This is an actual photograph.
There's the president's limousine going underneath down the street on the pass. There's smoke drifting out to the street, just like he said. He could see that from 240 yards away. How would he know that, unless he was there?
Run that back again.
Which one?
Where the smoke is. No, the actual
Wigman?
photo. Yeah. Okay, you tell me. You guys see any trains on the triple overpass?
No train.
The president has just been shot. Do any of you see any trains on the overpass?
You're right there. No train.
You
there.
cannot believe
No train.
how much time we spent looking at photographs, eyewitness testimony, because some people said, well, 2 officers said that a train was going over the track during the time the president was being shot.
There wasn't.
Where?
There isn't. In fact, the officer on there was an officer here that Ed saw. You saw this one. There was also an officer here. This officer said he couldn't cross because the train was passing between them at the time the motorcade was going underneath the underpass. I don't have a picture of that. Where'd it go?
And this
Did it go like lightning fast?
And this is great. He couldn't see the president getting shot. But guess how many shots he heard? Go ahead. 3.
You're standing right next to a train that would move.
You wouldn't think so, no.
Were you guys in the yard today and we kept hearing the trains and I said, you guys listen to the trains? Is it noisy? Okay.
Here, let's just real quickly read his statement. Okay. I heard what I thought for a moment was a firecracker, and I looked over towards the arcade and the trees and saw a puff of smoke come from the trees. The puff of smoke I saw definitely came from behind the arcade through the trees. That's what he said. Did these 2 people conspire to tell a lie? No. They saw the same thing. Puff of smoke came out 6 to 8 feet above the ground right under those trees. Just what he said. Right there. I want to show just a couple of shots of the Newmans.
Okay. Yeah, we're going to show you a couple of shots here of the Newmans, where the Newmans were that day.
Mr. Quinlan,
Yes.
I remember you telling us about that one woman that when she ran around the fence,
Jean Hill?
the 2 agents grabbed her.
Yes.
What about the man she said she saw breaking down a rifle? Did Ed see him?
Well, Jean doesn't say that to too many people, but I remember when we had a bunch of students, she was walking up the knoll there, and she said, I walked over like this, and then she turned around and she goes, wow, I just remembered something. She says, when I walked around, she says, I saw Dallas's finest. Well, Dallas's finest is a police officer. And she said a guy was on his knee and breaking down a rifle. We don't think Ed saw that because Ed has already seen another person going down the line. So what we may be seeing here, and Ed may have only seen one part of one shooter. Okay, there may have been 2 or 3 shooters on the grassy knoll, but we will never know that based upon, we think, a really shoddy autopsy on the President of the United States. And I'll tell you what, just by listening to Dr. McClelland, and I know you're not an autopsy specialist, but I'll tell you what, I would give him a dead body anytime and let him tell us exactly what happened. And I think we'd have probably gotten more and a better answer based upon what we thought what we got at the archives or at the Bethesda.
There's the limousine. Your target's there. Mr. and Mrs. Bill Newman, right there. Mr. and Mrs. Newman. Clayton and Billy Jr. They're standing right at the curb. The car's in the middle lane. The lanes are 13 feet wide. They're 13 feet from the car. They're upright. There's the limousine. There's the target. There's just out of view is Mrs. Newman, right there. She's holding on to Billy Jr. We believe a shot was fired here. There's the Newmans there in the much more next to them. I always get those two confused. But there's the car under fire. There's the Newmans. Now they're on the ground.
Do you see how many people were not around that area that day? Some of you guys were asking that question. And I don't think I gave you the answer today, did I?
No, you didn't.
Okay.
Very few people were down.
Here's the answer. Okay? The answer is, why were there so few people down there when they knew that the president's vehicle was going to travel down there? Well, there was a lot of people down there at about, let's say, 12:15. Tremendous amount of people. At about 12:19, a gentleman at the corner of Houston and Elm falls into the street and has a grand mal epileptic seizure. Okay? Right. Now, the Dallas police who are there run to his aid, and an ambulance is called. An ambulance comes into the area, which is driven by Aubrey Reich. And Aubrey Reich gets there with his attendant, and they put the man on a gurney, put him into the ambulance. And the ambulance is, sirens are going, and the lights are going. It's a code 3, I believe, isn't that what they're called? Siren, lights. Right now, when that ambulance came into that area, all the people who were down in this area, who are no longer there, they become the rubberneckers or the gawkers. They're going, what's going on? What's going on up there? Well, where's the president coming? In that area. So they rushed to that area to see what's going on. By the time the ambulance left, it was 12:23. They did not get time to filter back into where they were once standing. So you have very few people down there. Now, conspiracy?
Almost like a
Diversionary tactics? We believe it was a diversionary tactic.
You don't think he did have a seizure?
No.
No.
Never checked in the hospital. Where's?
They never did check into the hospital?
No. As soon as they got him there, he got up off the ambulance, the gurney, they got him inside. He goes, I'm fine. Aubrey Reich, the ambulance driver, said, well, we got to check you in. He goes, no, I'm fine. He walks away.
Now, what Aubrey Reich told us, Aubrey Reich told us, he says, this is kind of strange, but he says, I was on duty all day for the last 4 days in a row before the president got there. And he says, for the last 4 days in a row, at about 12:15, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we got calls to take an ambulance to the corner of Houston and Elm. We drove there was nobody there. It's kind of like a little boy crying wolf. On the 5th day, the president's there. And they're sitting there going, okay, fine, we got to go. So they went, and this guy's having an epileptic seizure. Aubrey Reich thinks that, kind of strange, but he says, he thinks somebody was timing how long it took to get the ambulance there with lights and a siren.
What do you do as a driver of a motor vehicle, red lights, sirens, especially if it's stopped right in front of you? What do? You go around it, you stop. Motorcade stops.
So maybe.
Boom! Use the ambulance as a way to stop traffic. They're 5 minutes late. The shooters didn't know that. Now the ambulance is coming up, picking this guy up. Here comes the motorcade. They go, whoa, we got to stop. They're under fire now. They can't go anywhere.
And plus this, here's another thing. As everybody's gawking and running to the corner up there trying to figure out what's going on, here goes the assassins are getting in position.
There's no attention.
There's no attention to them at all.
Here's the Newmans on the ground.
We don't know that, but that's...
This is taken from the camera car that's going down Elm Street. two of the camera guys jump out because they heard the shots, they see these people die down on the ground, they thought, oh my God, they've been shot. They run over and start taking pictures of them.
Remember you were saying something about two guys just lounging around, sitting there like nothing happened?
This is the guy with the umbrella, this is the guy with his arm raised up in the air. This is the great shot here. There they are, Mr. and Mrs. Newman. So, this lady is a Dallas Morning News reporter, Atkins, and I can't remember his last, it doesn't matter. There's it from the other side.
Why were the Newmans on the ground? Why were they covering their kids?
Gunshot.
Right over their head.
Parental automatic reaction.
Mr. Newman basically says he was in the military. He knows what gunshots are. He says the gunshots are coming over his head, back into his right. The back into his right is the grassy knoll, the picket fence line.
Here's what he said to the Dallas Sheriff's Office. By this time, he was looking in President Kennedy was directly in front of us, and I fell back, he fell back, then he fell back, blah, blah, blah. Then he fell down, we fell down the grasses. It seemed that we were in direct path of fire. I thought the shot had come from the garden directly behind me. I do not recall looking towards the Texas School Book Depository. I looked back in the vicinity of the garden. Why were these people never called to testify? They're 13 feet from the car. Because they saw something different. We can't have that. What do you want to ask, Mr. Hoffman?
Who likes to get the light please, candy thing?
Anybody want to ask a question?
Want to ask a question with Mr. Hoffman? Anybody?
Has anybody that he's talked to been, or anybody he's talked to since then been stuff, you know, out there or not, been killed or anything?
Knock on wood, no. 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 They're not worried about us.
I mean, not now, but right after that happened.
No. No. Do you know his uncle? His dad was when Ed got his tooth fixed, he told the dentist that he saw the president's head blown up.
His dad was mad.
Oh, his dad was, he went back to the flower shop after he got his tooth fixed. He told the dentist, his father was, why are you home? You should be at work.
He was adamant that he not talk about it.
Yeah.
He was really worried.
He was protective of it. He didn't want him to tell anybody. He was afraid for his life. And then that next weekend was Thanksgiving, and he went to his uncle. They went to the family, and his uncle worked on the police department. And he told his uncle, and his uncle didn't tell anybody because they were afraid that something would happen to him.
Can you
He was a consultant on the dad's case film, but in the film he's not mentioned.
No, but if you watch the film, you will see what appears to be people standing in the area where Ed said, where Lee Bowers said, where Sam Holland said, where Gene Hill said, where Mary Mormon said. I mean, all these people are seeing these people there. But what you do see is you see a railroad man carry a bag and walking down the line. That came directly from Ed. But that also came from J.C. Price, who's standing on top of the terminal annex building, sees the very same thing that Ed sees as a man walks away with the bag. Well, it's not really out of the ordinary because railroad switchman.
How would you know?
Yeah.
How would you know who he's? The guy's a worker. He's working on the line. We don't know.
Right.
And in the movie, it's called a lightning transition. It's just and it transitions to another scene. Watch it when we go back. You'll watch that scene. You'll see the man walking with the bag, and it transitions just a lightning shot, and then it goes to another thing. His part was very important, but Oliver Stone's movie was already 4 hours long, and he had to cut something out. That's the bad part. But his information is darn important. And I think the reason that Ed is still with us is because he cannot communicate openly like everybody else can. They're not worried about a guy like that because he can't talk.
And that's why today, guys, if you realize, we didn't march you in front of the Texas School Book Depository building, okay? We didn't march you on Elm Street or Houston Street. We went straight behind the picket fence on the grassy knoll, and then we went over to the railroad yard. And I said, you guys need to see this. This is the part of history that's not written. This is where the assassination actually took place. At least according to eyewitness testimony, doctor's testimony based upon what they were describing as the wounds. And when you put those together, you know, I don't know, maybe logic didn't work down here in Dallas on that day. You know, we've seen the possibility of two sons in Dallas. Can't be. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that go on down here, guys. And logic just does not explain it. Go.
After that day, like after the Secret Service pulled the gun, have you ever been threatened after that?
No. No.
No.
Because that's a great segue. Back in the 50s and 60s, if you had a disability as severe as his, what do they call you? Deaf and dumb, or retarded.
Or retarded,
because
yeah.
he can't talk. Yeah. Well, just like Jim Garrison, the character Jim Garrison says in the movie, just because a woman's a prostitute doesn't mean she doesn't have good eyesight. Just because he can't speak doesn't mean he can't see stuff. His visual enhancement is better than ours. He's not distracted. I believe him. Always have.
I believe it.
Why would he lie?
And
no reason to lie.
And whether Dr. McClelland believes it or not, he actually backs up what Ed is saying, and Ed backs up what Dr. McClelland is saying.
And they never met each other until last year, right?
Yeah, that was kind of a unique situation.
First time they ever met each other. Listen, we're keeping you way, way too late. Go.
I'd like to ask a question.
Depository today, I noticed that they don't even cover this side for any of the witnesses that are on the grassy knoll. They exclude the exhibit up there completely.
And because they saw something different.
They see what they want you to see.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's the government's version.
Good.
That's right.
Is that there?
Doc, go ahead.
There?
Has anyone checked out Posner's connections possibly
Yes.
with the mafia, or
Well, he was with some CIA. Dr. McClelland's asking about Posner, our little hero, Gerald Posner. Gerald Posner got a $3 or $4 million contract up front from Random House, which is a subsidiary funding by the Central Intelligence Agency. They gave him all the information and said, here, go write a book, we'll back you up 100%. He didn't write the book. Obviously, he didn't pay attention, but he didn't write the book to make clear a statement. He wrote it to make money. He already made his $4 million. I bought the book.
Nobody ever gave us the information. We did it the old-fashioned way.
We had to go dig for it.
We read, we researched, and we did it for years.
And interviewed people.
Okay? But who gets all the TV?
Gerald Posner's always on television.
And he's the guy.
Did someone write a book after that called Case Open?
Case Open, which was written by...
that was refuting the Harold Weisberg, wasn't it?
Harold Weisberg.
Harold Weisberg refuted Posner's called Case Open. Yeah, he says, well, you're an idiot. It's not really closed. It's open still.
And really,
technically, it really is. And the legal term it is, because homicide has no jurisdiction as far as time. You can still investigate a homicide 100 years from now. This case is still, according to the government, open because they never solved it to the 100% satisfaction of a jury of Oswald's peers. He never got that chance.
Please give our guests a round of applause.